Hello, and welcome to another Cloud Podcast, a podcast designed to bring you stories from the smartest minds in IT, operations, and business, and learn how they're using cloud technology to improve business and the customer experience. All right, well, welcome to another Cloud Podcast. Today, we're joined by Justin Keenen. He is the VP of Technology over at Takaya Modern Mexican. Justin, welcome to the program. Good to have you on.
Thanks, Alex. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. And Dustin Rydell, my co-host for today. How are things going over there?
Extremely well. Super happy to be on with Justin and learn what we can learn here today.
Excellent. I always like the backgrounds when we're doing these remote calls, remote work from home, and Dustin's got his Han Solo and Carbonite behind him. I love it. For all the Star Wars geeks out there. Always good to have. So Justin, what we always like to do at the beginning of these podcasts is just to get a background about you, right? How did you get started in technology? What led you to where you're at today? And then give us a little bit of background after that, just in what you're doing over at Takaya these days.
Sure. Yeah, great. Thanks. I started as a kid as a dishwasher in the restaurant business. Actually, before that, my grandfather was in the food truck business. So before we even called them food trucks, I was working and running around on those things. We used to call them hot trucks because the other ones were cold trucks, right? They didn't have a kitchen in them. Mm-hmm. So I grew up around food service and just in the hospitality industry, worked my way up from dishwasher to general manager. At some point, I decided, this isn't a long-term play for me, what I'm going to do. And the the transition to technology just happened. I think I was at the right place at the right time. And I got in through the support channels, right? Because I think when you're a restaurateur, you pick up the phone to get support. It's much more helpful when you hear someone on the other line that is also in the industry and not just, telling you to reboot it for the 18th time. So there's my career from there, went up to brands, and I haven't looked back. So I've been able and fortunate enough to work with some very large national brands like Sbarro, some regional brands, some medium-sized brands, even tried to start up once that didn't quite start up. So I feel like my breadth of knowledge of the restaurant industry is pretty wide, from quick service to fine dining and kind of everything in between.
Yeah, that's a great background. And what I love about the executives when we interview them that have a lot of experience in one vertical is that they go really deep and they really understand the industry, whereas some of them just bounce from manufacturing over here. We did hospitality here, worked for a law firm here. How has that experience been just being in that one industry, the retail hospitality, not retail, but food service hospitality, and how that's helped throughout your career?
It helps and it hinders, right? I mean, it'd be great to be able to take your career and learn from some of these other verticals. And there are some parallels to retail for sure, and hotels. But it's really a testament to how unique the restaurant business is. It's not like anything else. It is a manufacturing plant with a welcoming front end, and there's a people element to it. And think about food and how your relationship with food is, right? It's a very primal thing, just from the basic hunger pains that you get to all the way up to the emotions you get from having like the best king crab legs you've ever had in your life, right? It's all at a very emotional reaction. So, I was talking to another executive yesterday about, he's trying to figure out the hospitality equation. And it's something we've all, if there was an algorithm, this would be easy, right? It'd be so simple. It'd be really great. It's like, okay, we got music. Okay, what's the vibe? Where do we need to be on the vibe level? Where do we need to be on this? If there is an equation, there are several X factors in that equation, right? And there just will always have to be, because the human element is so just impossible to quantify. I say it a lot, to illustrate kind of some things I say, like, when bankers take over restaurant chains, things never go well, right? Because they're just looking at these numbers and they can't quantify how much is a vibe worth, right? They don't know those things. The other thing that kind of illustrates that point is just how many restaurants. Everybody's heard the thing about restaurants fail, right? There's this mythical number of 80% of restaurants fail in the first 2 years, whatever that is, right? I don't even know if it's true. It just tells a story. But what it does is tell you how hard it is. I mean, it's just really difficult to wrap your head around this. And you can have the best food in the world and still fail. You can have the best experience in the world and not the greatest food and still fail. It's just there's so many X factors in the business. So a lot of people talk about, how they can do it. I've heard people say, "Oh, I can start a restaurant chain. I go to restaurants all the time." Like it's one of those things that people think is easy to some degree, but I think it's one of the most challenging industries in the world.
I tend to agree. I've started a couple of very small companies, and restaurant is never on my list. It scares me too much. There's too many,
Smart man.
and a lot, exactly like you said, though, it's there's just all this complexity stacked on top of each other to really make a good restaurant experience. You're braver than me. You and your coworkers are braver than me for sure. Tell us how you're seeing technology just in the past 2 to 5 years come into not only the company as a whole, but to the locations themselves.
Well, yeah, it's been interesting. I think, 5 years ago, we were still struggling to understand what mobile meant for our guests, right? What does that mean? How would we be mobile, quote unquote, is such a broad term. Nobody really understood it. We had a major disruption, right? The delivery industry was born. The third-party delivery kind of took over our marketing efforts, to say the least, right? They listed our restaurants and tried to sell our product for us. That was a pretty major disruption that we're still, feeling the effects of, obviously, today. And that was really the kind of the big struggles, I think, was how do we deal with all these, we had Tablegeddon, and we had 10 tablets sitting up on our counters from different delivery orders. It was this game that we were forced into that we didn't ask for. All of a sudden we're competing with other companies for our own product and our own guests. And it was a huge challenge. Some people embraced it. Some didn't. I think the early adopters probably fared better. There was definitely a lot of economic challenges to it, but also it's just, it's owning your brand, right? It's like, oh my, somebody else has some sort of influence on my guests and interacts with my brand through them. It's very disconcerting. So kind of wrangling that in has been a journey. I feel like we were at the kind of tail end of wrangling that in, at least from our brands, before 2020. So that's really, obviously, in the last 5 years, the biggest disruption we've had. I mean, clearly, as everyone knows. But we were ready, I think, and lucky, because of, kind of that digital channels were coming. It was clear that digital channels were, what we're going to be up against. It's not just people coming into your brick and mortars anymore. It is very clearly, that's one thing the delivery providers emphasized and kind of hammered home for us, right? It's no longer just an in-person game. This is a digital game, and how do we win?
Yeah, it's very similar to that. I think that love-hate relationship with like Yelp, right? I've heard a lot of business owners that have struggled to embrace Yelp or appreciate Yelp because of the backhanded way of doing things to get the stars on their board, so to speak. But probably similar to this new digital with the Uber Eats and whatnot, Uber, all that stuff for delivery can be, some people love it, and they, like you said, they were early adopters and they jumped in. I think there's a lot that don't, because it does affect their brand. We talked before this podcast with you a little bit about, just like, call it futurism, right? And we talked about the digital on that side. How is the digital experience and technology playing a role just for the in-person experience, and how are you guys seeing that change over the past couple of years?
Yeah, it's well, so the biggest thing we've done is we started doing ordering at the table on your own device. That's got several different names. Ops like to call it order at the table. I like to call it BYOD. We heard, QR code ordering. You've heard about the resurgence of QR codes. We started doing that early, as we actually were planning on doing this before the pandemic, because we had a problem with our lines. You could, I know there's been some arguments, like Starbucks. I remember when they were going through this, they were saying, was the line a feature or a bug, right? We didn't know, but we definitely had a lot of people would see us from the street with the line out front and want to know what's going on there. But the way our menu works, we have, if you're a first time user, it takes a lot longer of an interaction. So we wanted to kind of give an express lane. So we were trying to figure out how to reward our regular guests, our loyal guests, right? And I can tie into the loyalty. Obviously, I'll get to that. But how would we do that? And we're watching other industries and how they do it, right? Is it a priority lane, right? Is it a priority boarding type of lane for some people? Is it a labor save, right? Are we going to not have to have people in the cashiers manning as often the POS? Is it going to disrupt the flow of the restaurant? That's probably one of the biggest things. We have a whole lot more pickup guests. So the pickup flow, how you interact with the premises, the actual facilities, and how you get in and out of the building. You'll see a lot of brands that re-adopted curbside ordering. So they don't even come inside. But probably the biggest thing that we have inside the four walls that we've changed is, we've obviously had to make some menu tweaks too, but digitally it's been order at the table. So the reason that works so well is because we have a very good loyalty platform, right? So we want to make sure that we have an excellent way of customer acquisition into our rewards program and our loyalty program. We want the data. So if you were kind of, if you referred back to your time frame that you gave, the last 5 years, I think about the rise of Amazon and the rise of e-commerce, right? And so these guys who are perfecting it, right? They have, interaction with all their guests in a logged in state all the time. You can't order anything on Amazon if you're not logged in. And so what we're finding is fascinating to us is that we're able to get guests in a restaurant inside a brick and mortar to actually log in. And that is a kind of a game changer. So if we ever ended up in a phase where it was 100%, QR code ordering or ordering on your device, and we were to kind of force you to make an account or at least some sort of guest account, the data collection from that is just mind-blowing, and new to us, and what we can do with that is really going to be interesting. And it comes back to, those loyal guests and what do they want to do, and how do they want to interact with the brand. It's very fascinating.
Yeah. That's incredible that you're getting people to log in brick and mortar.
Right.
It's so fun to hear because I've just experienced some of these changes from a consumer side of things, but I've never talked to anybody about it. And I've never really thought about it before our conversation here today. So it's so fun to hear the technology and the business. Seen it, right? Yeah.
You've seen it. Have you ordered at a coffee house that uses Square and gotten a receipt even though you didn't give them your email address?
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
Because you're logged into the Square app somewhere else. Yeah. Yeah. You're logged in.
And you gave it to someone else and they tied it back. Yeah. We're tying back to their credit cards. We're tying back to any kind of identifying information without it being, a security breach, to try and really do that. I think that's the next push in the retail and restaurant world, right? You want to get signed up. You get all your receipts by email now. All of that stuff, and that's great, and we want to triangulate you, but how do you interact with those people is kind of a whole different animal.
Yeah, for sure. So I want to just hit pause on the tech for just 1 minute. You're making me hungry talking about all of this. Can you just talk about the restaurants and give us a plug for where do we find you? How many locations? Somebody listening to the podcast is also going to be hungry and they're going to hop in their car and come visit you. How do I do that after this?
You can find us in Southern California and Arizona. We are based in Los Angeles. We are a fresh take on modern Mexican. So we focus on bowls, salads, burritos, and tacos, and some other fun stuff. We try to keep it as clean as possible, right? It's kind of the idea is somewhere you can go every day and eat our food every day and feel good about it, and feel healthy about it. The differentiator for us is that we're an opt-in menu. So we start off as a vegan and dairy-free option. All of our menu items start that way. You opt in. So if you think about most vegetarians, vegans, anyone that has dietary restrictions, they have to opt out. So if something says it comes with cheese, they have to say hold the cheese. That's an opt out. We start with nothing, and not nothing. We start with a base product, like a salad. On every item on the menu, you opt in. So you choose your protein and you choose your cheese. You can choose a vegan protein if you choose. You can choose carne asada if you aren't vegan.
Right.
You can choose a dairy cheese or a non-dairy cheese. We're really trying to be flexitarian, so to speak, right? We want everybody to have options. There's lots of people that are gluten-free, and really everything on our menu is gluten-free. So we're very approachable to anyone with dietary challenges or just preferences, right? So we're also kind of a lifestyle brand. We're very engaged with the customer. We're really experiential. So when you walk into our restaurants, you're just going to see a beautiful design. You're going to hear awesome music. You're going to see great, thoughtful lighting. And it's just a very welcoming, Southern California beach vibe. We were founded in Venice by our two founders, Tosh Berman and Amru Al-Manasir. They started Toca Madera. Actually, to back up, they came from the nightclub business, so they were, doing nightclubs, and I think they just kind of got tired of drinking all night. They wanted to go eat somewhere, so they opened Toca Madera in West Hollywood, which is surprisingly a nightclub type of vibe. It's very loud. It's got a DJ in the front. It's open till 2 a.m., but the food is also fantastic. And they approached the vegan challenge with a separate vegan menu. So if you sat down at this, fine dining, fine Mexican restaurant, and they knew you were vegan, you would actually get a separate menu. And it'd be mostly the same items. Anything that we couldn't make vegan just wouldn't show on it, but most of the items would be on there with vegan options. So you could order anything you wanted as a vegan option. That was wildly successful. It's still successful to this day. They've expanded that Toca Madera to Scottsdale. And it's one of the most amazing and beautiful restaurants you'll ever go to, from the moment you walk in to the moment you walk out. It's an experience as well. There's fire breathers, there's stilt walkers, there's a guy walking around with a guitar playing on wireless, dressed like Dia de los Muertes, kind of makeup on. The food is fantastic, and it's everything from tacos to Wagyu and kind of everything in between. And that was just fantastically successful for us there in Scottsdale, so much so that they'll be opening the next one in Las Vegas next year. But with that, being successful, then what's the next thing? And they wanted kind of every day. What do you eat every day? How do you engage with the brand you want to go to every day and be able to eat and feel good about it, and not feel weighted down or tired after you eat it? We want to have this nice, clean eating. We want to be able to go surf in the morning and get a salad in the afternoon and get a bowl at night. And it's worked fantastically well. Like I said, we used to have, before the pandemic, we'd have lines out the door. We still do have quite the demand. But every location that we've opened has just been gangbusters, and people really respond to that experience.
Yeah, and it really shows that you're hitting the right market, and you have a very ideal customer profile that you have set, right? It's that, whether it's the vegan and having the experience, or moving over to the next one, which is just stuff you eat every day, right? And the Southern California vibe, right? You're not missing out on that when you're developing those programs. You mentioned the opt-in menu versus opt-out, and what are some of the challenges that you had to face when implementing that, or that just come with that?
It's a conversation. That's the thing. We even call it a spiel, if you're familiar with any Yiddish slang or whatever, but we call it a spiel. Like, you have to give a spiel. So part of that line problem that we had, or feature, was that if you're a new user, it was a minute and a half of explaining to you how it works. I think it probably took me a minute just to explain it to you guys. It's like, hey, how does this work? They're staring at a menu board, and you got people behind you. So there was a spiel. In our digital channels, there is no such thing as conversation. It makes it a lot easier, right? It's like, hey, I want this bowl. The next question it asks you is what protein you want. It's very natural and easy to choose that, and it doesn't need any explanation. The other problem is that technology doesn't understand this, right? So it's like your POS systems aren't made for this. Your anything that kind of It's just tough, right? So Mexican menus are difficult for POS systems in general, but then when you have this kind of option on top of it, it makes it really difficult. You're looking at your PMix, for example. So how many tocaya salads have I sold? Well, that's an easy question. How many tocaya salads have I sold that specifically had on them shrimp and vegan cheese? I mean, that gets a lot harder to get at that data. And is that a menu item? I mean, and if we're selling a lot of those, maybe that should be a menu item.
Right.
One of the things that's underneath each item is a chef recommendation. So you have to, you'd ask, well, okay, I just want it the way the chef wants it made, right? If I have, if I'm a flexitarian or I'm an omnivore, yeah, the chef wants me to eat carne asada with queso Oaxaca. Sure, that sounds great. That sounds like the flavor profile that I want to have, and I don't have any restrictions on that. Great. So how do you ask your cashiers then to memorize 15 or 20 different combinations of chef recommendations that change all the time and new items come out and they can't? So when I first started, there was this every time. I don't know if you can, if you're not watching the videos, I'm turning around and looking at the menu boards, right?
Right.
My cashiers that had worked there for 9 months or a year, they'd have to turn around and look every time because they didn't have it memorized.
Mhm.
And so, it was hard to relate that. So we found a way to get that into the POS so that you can look down at the item and see what those things are. But that's not a natural or a normal feature for a POS to have. And so it was kind of shoehorning that kind of stuff in. So we found that we do have to do that once in a while. But we're getting better at it. And I think, we have a very high recidivism. So I think, the spiel is going down. People are getting more familiar with us. We're up to 20 units now. So they see us all around a lot more. But that's the biggest challenge. I mean, technologically, technology wise, it just doesn't fit typical food service paradigms.
Right. You guys are a little unique on that side of things. So I'm thrilled that I asked the question about the business because I didn't know the whole history, and it's an amazing story that you guys have. I'm wondering here in September 2021, and let me actually take one step back. You seem to be somebody who's diving into the numbers and the data and everything else. Here in September 2021, can you tell us, like, ballpark, what percentage of people are ordering off of the app? What percentage of people are ordering to go? What percentage of people are just walking through the front door? Do you have any data like that right now?
I have looked at it, but not recently, so I can make some estimates for you.
Sure.
But I don't know exactly. I do know the one that I have looked at recently is the QR codes, the order at the table, and it's around 4% right now.
Okay.
That varies by location. That may sound small to some and huge to others. I think it's kind of evolving, and I think it's kind of a good number to start with. We're looking at about 75 to 80% of our food off premises now. So the amount of people that are walking in to dine in has been severely affected by the pandemic, but has kind of started to climb back around. But that's almost a 180-degree flip from where we were, right? We were at almost 80% walk-in, and now we're some of our locations are 80% to go. The percentage of what is from our app and from the delivery partners, I don't know that number off the top of my head, and there's been some recent changes kind of that might skew that number a little bit. I don't think it's too far off industry standards, but we have a fantastic app that people really love, so we get a pretty good engagement on that, and we have a pretty good acquisition reward for them.
And can you tell us, how do you guys get to choose the delivery partners that you work with? And what does that process look like? What was kind of the key decision criteria that went into that?
Yeah, we do. We started, when I started here, we had, I could say all of them, right? I don't even know if it was all of them, but it was at least a handful, at least 5 per store.
Wow.
We are in a unique position to where our brand is kind of a jewel in a crown type of brand, where a lot of vendors, partners, suppliers, they really want us in their portfolio. So we have a lot of leverage there. Plus, our sales are great. But when people think about fast casual in Los Angeles, we're on the list. We're on that very short list very easily. And that was reflected in our partnerships, right? I mean, they scrambled. They really, all of the DSPs really, really wanted our business. We were able to leverage that and parlay that into an exclusive agreement with Postmates. So we actually cut everything off and just went completely unique with Postmates. That went great for us. And now obviously Uber took over Postmates. So we're exclusive with Uber, which includes Postmates right now. And that carried through their merger as well. But that gave us a fantastic leverage on pricing. That gave us fantastic leverage on marketing. So you can be, I think if some brands have finally started to embrace the third parties. They really like it. They're now, they have some of the economics kind of worked out. But then you got to think about, how do you get at the top of that carousel? Like, how do you get in the top of the apps, right? You got to be searchable in something that you don't control. And, you can't just buy some Google AdWords to get to the top of the Postmates app. So what we've developed was a partnership that has just been outrageously rewarding to both parties. We've been able to increase our sales on delivery more with an exclusive agreement than we had with trying all five. It also helps us kind of focus on marketing efforts. It didn't take long for our customers to figure that out. I think most people know, and everyone that's listening has multiple delivery apps on their phones. I tend to open one first before the others. But I also really have trained myself to know where I want to go. Like, there's a Chinese mom and pop Chinese restaurant that I know isn't on Postmates, so I'll just go to it. And we've been able to train our brands or our guests to find our brand very, very easily. Of course, Uber and Postmates are kind of pretty high up on the list, so it's not that hard. But really, the relationship that we have with them now has been extremely successful for us.
That's great. Better than the what I hear about the Yelp stuff. So with the review sites, but no, it's good that it's there. And we've interviewed a lot of people that work in customer experience and contact centers and support. And we talk a lot about the user experience, right? And how the voice of the customer and the full sales cycle from start to finish. And it's very similar from what we're talking about in in the restaurant and food space, is that nowadays you have to have this experience, but there's different types of people within your group of customers that are going to always want to do Postmates. And then there's the boomers what's Postmates, right? Or I don't know how to work my phone. Face ID is not working for me, those types of people. But you still have those other channels, it's like an omni-channel experience, just like it is for support on the contact center side. One of the topics I really wanted to jump into, and you had a lot of insight when we talked before, was around how companies like Chipotle and Starbucks and like Sweetgreens are basically, they consider themselves tech companies, right? Go a little bit into like what you mean by that, and how you see that, how that has evolved for those big brands.
Yeah, I mean, they're cutting edge. I mean, they were always kind of that way, right? Domino's has always said they're kind of a tech company that just tries to get pizza in your mouth. They started the pizza tracker, right, with very limited kind of data points, and they just kind of went for it to try to increase engagement. Sweetgreens the same way. Their engagement through their brand is very platform-esque, right? I mean, that's what they are. They are a platform. They do believe in their mission, and their mission is to get good food and healthy food out to as many people as possible. And they do that by the use of their platform, right? So the platform gets their product from their manufacturing facilities into people's mouths as fast as possible. It's fascinating to me, right? I mean, none of this would work unless the food is good, first of all, right? I mean, you have to have a good product. But, these brands, there's another one, Wingstop. Wingstop has always been a tech company because, it's just, you need volume, right? I mean, you need volume in some of these places. The engagement that you need with the guests is completing sales. It's e-commerce, right? And that's what I think we're starting to finally wake up to, is that no matter what we do, the complexity of the restaurant business includes an e-commerce platform. Just to throw something else on that pile of things that you got to, take care of as a restaurateur. But luckily, I think they did lead the way. I like to think of myself as a fast follower, maybe not as fast as I want to, but they're training the guests, right? They're training people how to interact and how to get their food delivered, and we're all starting to kind of wake up to that, and you're starting to see more and more brands that are engaged and in their digital platforms and their digital strategies, because no matter how you face it, I mean, tech is here; it's here to stay. It's also extremely complicated. But I think I would just advise watching those brands, right? I guess I don't remember if there's any specifics that I brought up that you can remember that were interesting, but I try to watch everything they do. I really do. I pay attention to certain things. They all want data. I think that's probably one of the biggest things, is being able to leverage data. And it's a perfect example of what you can do with that, right? You don't have to have the greatest pizza in the world, but if you have really good leverage, you leverage that data really well, and you leverage your digital platforms really well, you're just going to be successful, and it proves that point pretty well.
So, Justin, I was a server 20 years ago, but my food industry knowledge maybe stops there. I mean, I use these apps. I'm a consumer, probably like a lot of the folks watching this podcast, right? We do not have the expertise that you have. Can you tell us? I mean, I'm thrilled with Starbucks when it's like, hey, you ordered these things last. Like, I'm just so happy when they come up and I can hit 2 buttons and like get my food in 7 minutes. How else are you guys leveraging data? Because you've brought it up a couple of times. So I feel like there's probably some gold in there that, just the average consumer out watching this podcast doesn't really realize, that you're like, wow, this is really valuable. How can we make improvements to our experience? How can we make improvements to our food? Like, I'm sure there's just so much behind that. I don't even know which question to ask, really. Hopefully I'm giving you enough direction right there.
Yeah.
I'm not enough of a food expert to really get to the heart of the question.
Well, I won't ask you what the data scientist does, because I don't know if anyone really knows. I kind of have an idea of what data scientists, data analysts. I think in the industry, in the development industry, data engineering is still something that's almost completely ambiguous right now. We're all learning it. Think of it this way. I can get. So what we're doing right now is we're just trying to capture, right? We want to capture as much data as we can from everywhere else. Every possible interaction, every possible spot we can get data, we want it. I think that the general thought is, and this comes from Starbucks, is what they call a flywheel. It's a digital flywheel. You want to get, it's hard to get the wheel spinning, right? If you get somebody to come in once, that gives it a little push. If you get them to come in twice, it gives it a little more push. There's an adage about 3 times and you're kind of hooked, or something like that. But obviously, the more you come in, the more we engage with you, the faster that wheel spins, the more we can get you back. And we want to develop that habit, and we want to keep that wheel moving, and you're coming back regularly. That's the goal that we're all looking for, right? It's great to get food in people's mouths, but it's really great to get them to come back once a week. I mean, that's like phenomenal, right? That's what we're all after. So the digital flywheel is what we're after. We use a loyalty partner called Thanks that really does a fantastic job of presenting that data and engaging with our customers in that manner. There's a lot more to it, right? There's a long way to go to explain, what I'm personally looking for in that digital engagement. I think the best example I can think of is Netflix. And you might think, well, how does that relate to food, right? But Netflix has said publicly, like, they want to be your first choice in digital entertainment. And we want to we do that by continuing to surprise you and delight you. And that's it. We want you to be the first choice. So if we can surprise, delight, and engage with our customers, we want to be their first choice in dining out or dining in, or whatever it is, right? We want to be the first food choice that they make. The way that they do that is by constant evolution and metric ton of data. I mean, they have so much data on you and what you watched and when you watched it and what's going on. You'll never see that suggested for you be the same. I mean, it's just always evolving. They're always increasing content and engagement with you. But that's the kind of personalization that we're all after. And that's the next kind of gold rush, is data for one-to-one personalization.
Yeah, it's interesting how much data has transformed and how important it is for businesses to collect data. And we've talked to other people in healthcare and IT and how there's some things that they want to collect, but they can't quite collect it all, right? Because there's so much out there and
Right.
there's just so many
Right.
nuances to it that can get you in trouble too, which is tricky. But I think, in your world in the restaurant space and whatnot, like there's definitely a lot to gather. I have a good friend that does a loyalty program through text marketing. They specialize now in car washes. And he told me a couple of years ago, he's like, it's about the data now. He's like, the loyalty stuff is
Yeah.
great, but it's about helping collect data and then using that to like give back to their clients to show them, hey, different ways
Drive
that they can
drive
strategize.
frequency.
Yeah.
Yeah, drive frequency. They want you to come and wash your car more often than you think you need it.
Yeah.
That's it. We want you to come to our restaurant more often than you might do on your own.
Yeah.
Drive that traffic.
So we're almost done with time. I want to get one last question in, more on the technical IT side. And you talked about going from about 10 units restaurants to 20 now. What were some of the challenges as an IT department of growing from 1 to 5, 10, and now 20 that you face as other companies looking in your spot that might have a couple locations and are growing as well that you had to overcome?
The biggest challenge, I think, is for any restaurant, whether you have 0 or 100, the challenges are almost identical. You still have a lot of the same legal obligations. The HR department still, is important. You may not have one, but you may be it. I mean, you might have to wear a lot of hats, but those needs don't change, right? The
Mhm.
the restaurants that have three units have the same needs in IT, in ops, in legal, in HR, in payroll challenges. Just all of those different departments still exist. It's just hard. So it's hard to address those when you're not able to afford all the resources. The digital shift has been, difficult. We had to make sure our infrastructure was up for it. That's the first thing. Is the plumbing working, right? Is the water flowing? That's number one. How do you kind of influence and stay ahead of everything, and let people know what's coming and why we need to make investments now for what's happening, next year, is always kind of challenging, right? The budget in the restaurant business is always difficult. So hopefully one thing that's happened with the pandemic is that it did kind of highlight how important tech is, and maybe people will start to wake up to spending money and putting some money in tech. But where are you going to get that from, and how are you going to be able to budget for it? You probably have noticed prices going up all over the place,
Mhm.
and this is kind of probably a driver for that, or one of the many drivers for that. But yeah, one of the biggest challenges has just been kind of being able to be flexible and being able to see what's coming. I mean, it's hard. I'm actually starting to do research right now on text ordering and voice ordering, and I don't know if I'll ever implement those at Tokaya, but I do know that it's coming, and I want to make sure that I'm ahead of it. I'm aware of what's going on and who's doing what in that space. Um, because when something does happen or when things come up, we want to make sure we're able to move in that direction. I'm laying the groundwork now for something that might be in 5 years from now. Um, that's really tricky. So getting buy-in on tech, from people who really know food or know people or know facilities or those kind of things, getting the buy-in is probably one of the bigger challenges.
That's incredible. I I still have like 10 more questions, maybe 100 more questions. This has been such a fascinating topic. Unfortunately, we are
Yeah, more
running out
answers.
of time. Yeah. Do you want to do one more?
Sure, I got time.
So do you have how do you said that the problem is the same whether or not you have 1 unit or 100 units. How,
Mhm.
and from looking at your LinkedIn, it looks like you have some consulting background. What advice do you give to those mom and pops that have a single store or 5 locations but aren't on that same growth trajectory that you guys are on? Is there a plug and play system that like includes the full ecosystem, or how do they handle this? Because you know your company is lucky to have you, and the team that you've built, but how do you do this with 1, 2, or 3 units?
Yeah, that's a great question. And from the consulting and the vendor side, what they really want to do is solve all your problems, right? They really want to, hey, I'm here for you. You will need to buy us or our product because we can do all of this for you. My number one thing is that is a huge red flag. Anyone that says they can be all things to all people is just flat wrong. They just can't. So you need to be very careful about your selections and really check references. I think is probably one of my biggest things. You'd be amazed and surprised at how many people don't check references. Do that on your vendors, right? If you're going to sign up for a company that does, we have this online ordering platform and it integrates with the deliveries and it also does loyalty rewards and it has gift cards in it. Also, it does inventory. It will manage your brothers and sisters-in-law's side business as well. And it does, it'll also clean your house. It tells your Roomba where to go. Those are they're just totally different things and they don't make any sense. And it's really appealing and it's really something we want, right? So you have to choose best of breed in certain areas and kind of the things that are really, core competencies that are really dialed in, right? So the reason why Olo has been so successful is because they have it in their name. They do online ordering. They do online ordering. They do online ordering. They don't do much anything else. If they need loyalty, there's loyalty platforms that plug in, right? So you want to choose, then you can choose your best loyalty platform. Mm-hmm. Credit card processing is a huge trap, right? So the POS companies now make you use their credit card processing and everyone goes, oh, that's great. It's all just transactional, no big deal. Well, if you do the math, you're paying a whole lot more for your POS and your credit card processing combined. So keeping those kind of things separate is critical to financial success. And on the other hand, you don't want to overwhelm your operators, right? So how many systems do your operators have to log into every day, right? They have to log into a scheduling app. They have to do inventory. They have to do their sales reporting. They have their emails. They have their guest interactions. How many are they going to have to log into in a day? So there's a balance, and it's not easy. It does come down to kind of what you can afford. A lot of vendors and consultants are looking for a certain unit count before they'll even engage with you because it's just not profitable at that point. Mm-hmm. So you have to really kind of try and make your footprint a little bigger than your shoe size and get engaged with some of the best in breed. Nice. Best of breeds.
Yeah, it's great advice. Greatly appreciate it. Justin, this was so fun having you on. You hit on, just general business issues, the complexity of the restaurant industry, and then where tech is at today, how the pandemic changed it, and kind of where we're seeing tech head in the future. It's been super fun to get a behind the scenes view of how restaurants have been handling the pandemic and technology. Thank you so much for joining us on this podcast. We will look forward to seeing you at a restaurant in the very near future. I might be heading there tonight. So
come on over. Let's do some tacos and margaritas anytime.
Yeah, tacos and margaritas. And then I need to head up to the one with the stilts as well. So sounds like a super fun date night.
The Toca Madera, right? That's the one.
Yeah, Toca Madera.
Toca Madera. Fashion Square in Scottsdale. Yeah, I'm extremely proud of that restaurant. We separated off, so Toca is now it's kind of its own entity, but I will remember and I will always hold a special place in my heart for that restaurant. It is phenomenal. One point about that restaurant you're going to notice when you walk in, it's the way you look and the visual path we give you when you walk in the door was thought out meticulously. So when you open those big giant doors and you walk into that restaurant, every single placement and what you see going into that restaurant was every part of it was planned out.
Wow.
That's what makes it great. I love it. Yeah, Justin, again, thanks so much for your time and for hopping on the podcast. We really appreciate it. And we look forward to getting out and having some drinks together. Do margarita time.
Thank you, Justin.
Anytime.
You got it.
Thanks, guys.
Well, that wraps up the show for today. Thanks for joining. And don't forget to join us next week as we bring another guest in to talk about the trends around cloud contact center and customer experience. Also, you can find us at adleradvisors.com, LinkedIn, or your favorite podcast platform. We'll see you next week on another Cloud Podcast.